Welcome to Buddhaland Podcast. I'm Stacy. Today, I'm joined by Johannes Frischknecht, an artist from Switzerland. Johannes has been fascinated by mandalas since childhood, painting them as a daily spiritual practice for more than 60 years. Immersed in Western, Tibetan, and African traditions, he has lived as an artist, yogi, Tanka specialist, and cultural bridge between East and West. Thank you so much for joining us today, Johannes.
Thank you.
So you started drawing mandalas instinctively at a very young age. How did that happen?
I think children which are born in this world, they need structure. And mandalas is a symbol for orientation and structure, finding a structure in this world, which is amazing. We cannot really understand whole the creation, but in a little scale, we try to be structured. And I had a necessity to be structured, not to be completely lost in the infinite.
So when you were drawing mandalas, you're searching for a structure.
Yes, for sure. You know, on one hand, in the absolute, there's everything impermanent, but in the relative, if you cut a tomato or a fruit, or if you cut a tree, or everything appears in structures, look concretely and disappear. The necessity of structure is innate in us, in everybody, in all the cultures.
And when you were a child, in terms of visual inspirations, you mentioned that your mother were actually making textiles. So you are familiar with all kinds of patterns as well.
Yes.
Did that influence you?
Right, totally.
Could you say more about that? Like the first time when you saw these impressions about these patterns?
In my house, my mother was already in textiles, and I saw patterns. That's for sure. This I cannot deny. But I was inspired more or less also by mental structures, combining the outer structures with mental compositions of structures. Because when I grew up, naturally my parents were honest people, but I saw lying and pretending and cheating. I didn't trust the environment, so I focused on the Native Americans, which were at least shown in film as truthful speakers. They didn't speak with a two-pointed tongue. So I tried to structure me not by the outer behavior of my parents and environment. I tried to focus on a totally other structure or other culture. I identified myself with this kind of so-called wild people, but very structured and very honest.
Yeah, I guess when you were growing up, like Native Americans and other ethnicities may have been seen as others. They were not really understood deeply. I guess that's why you were drawn to Tibetan Buddhism as well. How did you first encounter Tibetan Buddhism? Because it is like very different from your Western tradition.
The first thing my mother, when I was a small boy, told me about different cultures. Also that the black guys which were transported to America from Africa impressed me very much. And also she explained me different, she had not a big knowledge, but she explained me about Buddhism, that Buddha was a king and he renounced his fortune, his kingdom, his privileges. And I think it's quite unique that some guy on a top position is seeing his role not as a dictator or a president, but as a servant, not only from a political point of view or a money point of view, but also psychologically. And so he renounced his wealth, his fame, his palace, his privileges to find another kind of serving the beings. And this impressed me very much. I was not a king, I was not a poor, I was not a beggar, but somebody who achieved something or inherited something, that he goes beyond these privileges. This impressed me as a small boy. And so that's the first time I was hearing of Buddhism. Then later on, a Tibetan child came into a friendly family, and this child is 1 year younger than me. She was quite, from the European point of view, uncivilized and untamed. Her adopted mother had blonde hairs, and she wanted to be like her. Naturally, she came from another continent, and she wanted to be like us. And she tried to, with washing soap, to clean her black hair, and that they become blonde. And this impressed me totally. I find that so funny, but also impressive. So I was always a good friend to this girl, and later on, when we were adolescent, I wanted to know about her culture. She forgot almost everything. She did not even speak one word Tibetan. So they took me to meetings, and there I met the first Tibetan youth meeting in Europe, and I met also lamas, and they were so totally different than whatever I knew from my culture, and I was fascinated. And I tried to communicate with them. They didn't speak my language, I didn't speak their language, but with some hand signs. And then later I got a translator, and then I decided to learn Tibetan. And one Lama was a quite learned guy. He wanted to learn German to function in our society, and so we made an exchange with hand signs. We didn't speak each other's language, and we showed only to objects. And like Stone Age guys, we learned each other's languages. It was very interesting and very challenging.
I see. Yeah, you speak fluent Tibetan. Last time we were in Hong Kong, we were having this chat with the Lama, and you communicate perfectly. That took years of dedication. I'm not sure which came first. Did you become a Buddhist first, or did you work as a specialist of Himalayan art at Kola Auction House first?
I mean, more than all cultural attraction were some philosophical points in the Western culture. Even they speak a lot, but they speak a lot of nonsense. From my point of view, they don't know what is dying and how is the process of dying. And in the book of Karma Lingpa, Pada Tödol, it's explained in a very, very deep way. And I was fascinated by the fact of dying, because of everything we possess we lose when we die. And dying is if you look on your watch, the dying process, every second actually time is running out and the new time is starting. So dying and birth is a philosophical thing which fascinated me. And then another thing I saw, that in the white society we were totally manipulated by media's food industry, where they put sugar and all this. Naturally, I did not understand that in a deep sense as child, but I felt that we were manipulated. And for me, this manipulation was similar to black magic. And I wanted to study structure to discover this kind of hidden manipulation. And by Buddhist thinking of very rational and logical reasoning, I expected that I can or have a chance to look behind the curtain of manipulation. I think the Western culture is very cruel, manipulated society since at least 2,000 years from the Roman time, where the Roman killed everybody who did not went under their structure. Then the Roman Catholic Church, that's why it's called Roman, they had the same strategy of world power, and they also killed and they converted by all means everybody. Then came Inquisition, where witches or natural doctors and all the old remains of old culture were totally eradicated, and hundred thousands of women burned alive. Imagine what kind of impact it made on the European psychology over 100,000 of years. That's why we are very frightened and not very courageous. Native American were a mere sample that even if you are killed, but you have a lot of courage to resist the manipulation. So this point interested me. And then the third fact of reincarnation. When I was a small child, I talked to my parents that I was once in another person, and I felt somehow the reincarnation as a fact for myself. My parents, they saw me as a small boy with a lot of fantasy, but they didn't took me serious, which made me totally angry. And I thought myself, these guys are so uncultivated and stupid. Why I'm born here at this place? So these kind of things moved me towards Buddhism, but also I'm interested in all kind of religions. And I think religion, as Marx mentioned, it has also a totally dangerous side of manipulation and structured form of Buddhism where Buddha says, don't be stupid and ignorant to believe anybody who says, I'm a Buddha. This is bullshit. You have to read what he says. You have to look logical and reasoning. And if you see by your own decision that it's bullshit, leave Buddhism. It's not important. But if you see something logical and pragmatical, right, which is not harming yourself and benefiting you and others, then you can integrate it in your system. Otherwise, any religion can be, and any science and any form of whatever can be very dangerous if you don't reason by yourself.
Would you call yourself a Buddhist?
Yeah, from all the religions I belong, I think the most logical and most reasonable and specially structured is Buddhism. You know, the Jewish religion, the Jewish, they are very intelligent and they have the world power in economics and they were defending themselves and resisting against others over centuries. But if I read this text, it's very much their own history and which king killed the other king, and it's totally not interesting. And as well in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it's just Jewish history, and I can read it, but it doesn't make me sense. As well, the Islam, to read the Quran is naturally, they have many good aspects, but it's not structured. And Buddhism is so structured, and it's like if you build a house, you cannot build a house by branches and put trees and measurements together. You have to have a structure to build a house. You have to have a base, then you have the walls, and you have the roof, and internally. Whatever I was reading and hearing in Buddhism gave me a certainty that I understand it. It's not illogical compound of different elements. And just yesterday I discussed with somebody and I told, I cannot understand this three monotheistic religion because it's a gathering of different stories, but unlogical. But Buddhism is very structured, and it gives me somehow a structure.
Yes, indeed. I think Buddhism is definitely very comprehensive. It covers the
Yes.
mind science,
Yeah.
cosmology, how to function in society, and how to elevate oneself and how to benefit others. Skillful means it's like a treasure house where you just discover and then to build, and at the same time with clarity and a direction. And I have another question for you because you have met and also talked to and even worked with many prominent teachers. For people who are kind of new to Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, how do you identify a good teacher? Like, what kind of teachers are worth following? Because I think there's a fascination all over the place where people want to find the most famous, most special teacher in the world.
I mean, naturally, normal people are driven into fame and name wherever, because these people you find easily. But then in the tradition of Buddhism, they say, check your teacher over 10 years and he will check you, but this is not possible. We are living in such a quick world. Then as I studied with approximately 120 different people, I found a lot of corrupt people and money guile people and mentally disturbed lamas. But the very humble ones, very humble and at the same time very open one impressed me the most. So if you want to have an intellectual knowledge, then you have to go to the university or the very studied ones, which can you explain you all the text and they'll learn by heart 100 books and all that, which can be a structural help. But then you can find very easy or very simple people which leave few facts of all these assemblies of 100,000 facts, but in the simplicity being much more warm-hearted, more humble, more even more logical in their approach, more yogic. Finally, I came from the Gelugpa side where I had this Geshe Larampa, and they gave a lot of importance on their knowledge, and they were proud of their knowledge. Then I descended to the Sakya, and I met Kalu Rinpoche and Karmapa, and then I came to the Nyingmapa side. And finally, I prefer first good human beings, which are not cheating all the time. If they want too much, as Tibetans in exile, they consider them as refugees, and they lost their goods, their monastery, their gold, their name and fame. So they have all the kind of refugees in the world have a kind of loss or trauma. And the trauma point of view is not the right approach for Buddhism. Buddhism should be logical, neutral, not national. It should be like a science, when you have mathematics. You cannot, perhaps say a Chinese or an American or whoever, who find a new formula of mathematics or a solution, but it doesn't belong to white or Arabics or Chinese mathematics. It's just a kind of logical thing. And in the same sense, I feel Buddhism, it's naturally, if you start the first books in India, it's come of a very old ancestral Sanskrit, Pali, called named culture. But if it sticks to India as a culture, you can really forget Buddhism. It's not interesting. You Chinese, we Swiss, we never become old Indians 2,500 years back. This is totally stupid. We have to live in our modern time, but we can understand the structure and of the mind and our behavior and psychology. I say to my kids, for example, and my kids I never forced into Buddhism. And I said, it's good to know tradition, it's good to know science, but it's also good to study psychology as a neutral pillar to ancient traditions. Science can be a factor of correcting some misconcept of tradition, but psychology is also something neutral which doesn't belong to Buddhism or Christianity or whatever. I think if you study the old cultures, you might be frightened by the misconcepts they had sometimes. So
Yeah,
I agree. And actually, one Lama told me, you are like Marx. You say religion is opium for the folk. But I must say, also in Tibetan Buddhism, some facts are really totally ignorant and totally misconcept. And we have to speak it out. If in a religion you cannot speak out the facts, and what's the hell? You have to believe blindly. That's stupid. We are modern people. We are living now, not 2,500 years back.
Yeah, that's very insightful. And I think because you have immersed yourself in Tibetan cultures and you are a good friend with Tibetan peoples, I think a lot of people, they tend to describe the whole Tibetan population as completely holy, and they don't dare to
It's
address
stupid.
anything critically. But
Yeah,
like
this is
any
totally
ethnicity groups, we all have our baggages from the past, so to speak. And even if you look at Chinese culture a few thousand years ago, there were a lot of problems in the
actually.
past as well, and which we cannot carry on. That's how we have 5,000 years of civilization. So that's very insightful. And now you basically follow the Nyingma tradition. Could you walk us through your daily practice?
My daily practice. Yeah, I try not to be too lazy. I try to be for 1 hour a little bit formal, which is a little bit stupid to follow the formal tradition, but it's like a fitness training of formality or of facts, psychological facts. Now, 6 months in Kenya, I got up between 5 and 6, and I had after sunrise 1 hour sitting on the balcony and did my composed meditation book. I didn't overtake it. I have a collection of different facts which I tried to learn by heart or to repeat or focus on it. And I tell to myself on one side, it's It's formal and traditional and old-fashioned. On the same time, you have to be liberated totally from these old-fashioned structures. You have to be accurate in the modern time. So one of the practices which is very fascinating is Tonglen. Tonglen is one of the best methods to overcome the fixation on the ego. Tonglen means to take every political, religious, economical, scientific stupidity on yourself, trying to burn your attachment on the reality of things, reality of dharma, reality of science, reality of money, reality of body, somehow dissolve it and into voidness, at the same time develop compassion. It's an easy practice, but it's also somehow complicated. So this is I wrote the text for myself where I say all the traditional means with bells and statues and tankas and wow, this circus of implements is nothing against understanding the true nature of mind. And when you understand the true nature of mind, compassion and thinking of others, of society, and participate with others is a natural result of it. For example, I say it with other words. In whole Tibetan Buddhism, from the lowest of the 9 vehicles of Hinayana, Mahayana, Tantrayana, and the essential point, you can say, is Rigpa or Marikpa, understanding, pure understanding of mind. And if you have this, or you believe, or you have a glimpse of this understanding, then automatically it should turn into Sorikpa. And Sorikpa means all the science of architecture, medicine, astrology, but actually everything which is showing in a material form of way. Shantideva, for example, Shantideva says, is nothing a bodhisattva should not learn to understand and benefit the others. And in the same time, I try to formulate it in Rigpa and Sorikpa. When you understand the essential thing, your problem is solved. What else has you do? You have to help and serve others. Nothing else. Very simple.
And painting mandalas is also one of your daily practices.
It's a psychological self-healing structure for me. You know, if you do something very small, perhaps you feel very small, but then you see that all the small particles building an entire whole, and patience and concentration and all this kind of perseverance and giving, not only doing it for yourself, but also having pleasure of others. You can, mandala painting, you can integrate the 6 parameters of a bodhisattva, giving, ethical feeling, then all the 6 parameters you can integrate in the mandala painting as a fact. Even you can dissolve the result into voidness in the absolute. There are 5 relatives and 1 absolute practice in these 6 parameters, and you can train that by enemy. If you are a street cleaner or a mandala painter or anything, you can try to integrate that in your daily practice.
I see. So I guess in the modern life, everyone should be encouraged to find either a craft or a profession where they can practice the paramitas. And whatever you do, you can use it as a tool to spiritual growth.
I think so.
Yeah, I think that's very encouraging for our listeners. And also, you worked as a specialist of Himalayan art at the Kola Auction House in Switzerland. What ancient Buddhist art inspired you most, both as an artist and as a practitioner?
There was an old lady who resigned because she was old, and she overgave me this job, and I had to jump into the pool and swim, and I needed Tibetans to instruct me because I didn't understand anything. And I didn't want to show up with my name. I tried to be secret a long time, and I was most fascinated by the Buddhism, and the art also is quite interesting. Once a Chinese delegation came to my shitty apartment, seeing the artifacts I had. with a Tibetan guy, a very nice guy who worked for the Chinese embassy in Zurich. They came visiting me just in my apartment, looking and discussing with me. In Koller, one motivation was to keep these 1,000 artifacts together, which were sold by money all over the world. And I photographed it secretly, and I made a big collection of slides, which I gave to a friend, or sold to a friend who has also a kind of museum idea behind. I learned a lot, but I didn't want to be the total representative. I was too young, and my self-esteem I was not proud and sure of myself. I had to speak with all the kind of important people from all over the world. I could speak, but I didn't want to be the chief salesman. And sometimes lamas came, which is forbidden for them in their system to sell objects. And so I had a kind of strange position
Yeah.
between everybody. And when I would have made millions with the culture of the Tibetan state, then in the Buddhist scene, I would have got a very bad name. So I tried to play a very strange role between a specialist and helping the people and learning myself and don't destroying my name.
Yes, I can understand. It was not an easy position for you to be in, especially I think for you, Dharma and learning about it is your priority. But let's just focus on ancient Buddhist art. How did that inspired you as an artist or as a practitioner? Is it a connection with the past masters, or is it the artistic techniques or aesthetics that influenced you?
First in Buddhism, as in the monotheistic religion, it was forbidden to make an image of the absolute, because the absolute cannot be shown in the relative. So first, Buddha was not even shown. If you go to the Bhopal Stupa, they show an umbrella, and you have to imagine the Buddha under an umbrella, but he's not an image. Me, naturally, I have the link to the Mandalas, which are especially tantric image of the complete universe, from the cell, the atomic cell, up to the universe, and the interconnection between outside and inside, and the different structures of the directions. And these directions you have also in the Native American tradition. If you pray to all the four directions, to down and up to the sky. And Jung, our Swiss psychology, wrote about this kind of symbolic art, not only from Tibetan, but also inspired from Buddhist. Naturally, this was very fascinating, very fascinating. And I came of a middle class environment. My father liked books. He collected books. He was open for culture, but mainly European classics. So for me, I was just fascinated, just that other thing. And I have now an Ethiopian friend in my house, born in Ethiopia, grown in Ethiopia. He was living 20 years in Germany, then he was living almost 20 years in France. And he sees the German language and structure and psychology so different from French psychology. And so what does it mean? It's a really chance, if anybody in our world, but it's not the case, if few of us have the chance to study totally different cultures, different languages, it gives you so much three-dimensionality to observe everything. So this was a chance to discover this kind of art, and I felt from the inner point of view much closer to this art, but I also connect to the Western artists, which Van Gogh, which was a crazy guy, or Gauguin, or Brancusi, which had a Tibetan link. I'm fascinated by all the art.
Yeah, that brings to the next question. Basically, in your work and in your life, you bring together formal training in Western fine arts, deep knowledge of Asian art, and a lived Buddhist practice. Which of these informs you most? Or is it an interplay between all three?
As a Western boy guy, I have to function in this society. Even if I don't like to function, I had to somehow adopt or cooperate. But inwardly, I see the foolishness and the concurrence thinking of Western psychology, which is just bullshitting the world since hundreds and thousands of years, which as is for me senseless. So my inner psychology is much more Indian, Tibetan, Bhutanese. And now also I grow into the African culture, which is also more relaxed than the Western stressed, manipulated mind. You know, the Western think whatever stone building is existing in the world was done by them, but the pyramids are much, much older and they are lying on African ground. And from the South Sudan, also the black culture went into Egypt, and from Egypt they spread all over. The Ethiopian guy who is in my house, he has 3,000 years. They had kings and culture and language and tradition. So it's very interesting to compare and to cooperate and see the value of even pygmies, or they are living in the desert, how they can live in the desert without any technology. It's also amazing knowledge. And they have also amazing medical knowledge. I had now a friend, her grandfather was a traditional healer, but now he has no successor. It's just lost. Old culture old knowledge is lost. And how to overbridge this Western irradiation of all ancient knowledge and how to bring it to the modern time, this is a fascinating thing. And as you also do and me do, this gap to overbridge with art is an interesting question.
Let's give some credit to Western cultures. Your work resonates with the insights of psychologist Carl Jung, also Swiss, who introduced the mandala to the West as a tool for healing and integration. Beyond its effectiveness in psychiatric practice, do you think he got everything right about the mandala?
No,
And if
no.
not, what did he miss?
First, you know what? With the phenomenon of the Tibetologues, you had Tucci and some others, which one went perhaps to India or to Bhutan or to Tibet, but in former time, Tibet was totally closed. So they had information which they passed to another guy and another guy and another guy. They never had first information. So and Tibet was a projection like in a fairy tale where the people are behind the seven mountain range, and all the projection, all stupidity fairy tale projection was projected to Tibet, and the reality was absolutely unknown. So Jung had a glimpse of his psychological interpretation, but he has never had a direct informant, somebody who told you this is right, this is bullshit. And what he wrote, the preface to the Bardo Tödel, the book of dying, which he had no idea himself about the secret practice of karma linked Bardo Tödel. How he could have. But still, there were some Westerners, Kant and some philosophers, and also some sinologues, which were fascinated by China, and they started in the last century or beginning of last century to open up, few of them, to the huge ocean of knowledge of Asia. And so this kind of influence fascinated me also.
Yeah, understanding takes time. And as you mentioned, now you spend quite a lot of time in Africa as well. So with Western, Asian, and African cultures and different ways of thinking, what do you believe we can learn from each tradition? And of course, we have been critical and logical, but let's be hopeful. Let's envision, like, how do you envision humanity moving forward together? And where do you find hope?
Yeah, hope in the use of the world, because they are not so racist as the parents and the grandparents. They can travel easier, they can exchange. And as Asia is already the most powerful continent at the moment, and has the most of people. India and China together and Indonesia together have half of the world's population naturally. And all the production of the world is done in China and in the future also in India. So certainly this continent is overpowerful, and the America with its military superpower is declining, so they don't have to say much in the future. But Africa, I think also the youth are not stupid at all, and they grow in number. Look, for example, Nigeria has 250 million, and Ethiopia has 110 million people. Egypt has perhaps 120 million. So it's a growing continent, which is also totally rich, the richest continent in culture and languages and history. So we have to try to coordinate in a friendly way. I told to my Ethiopian friend yesterday night, what chance we lost as white people, which came 200, 300, 400 years back to Africa, and we thought we are better than all, and we misused them. If 400 years back we would have coordinated with them and exchanged the knowledge and friendly, world would be in a totally other situation. And in a small scale, I try to cooperate with these very simple people in Africa and exchange. I went to a healer, I went to a secret forest. They explained us the healing plants. Naturally, it's a small reminder of the past, but we have to be careful in cooperation. For example, Indians integrated very nicely in East Africa since few hundred years. Yes, and the Chinese and the white, I met also Chinese in my hotels in construction business in Nairobi, and they are quite relaxed, but we don't mingle up so much with the original population, which is fascinating also to mingle up. And naturally they are so different, sometimes so different concepts. For example, one of Israeli guy, he had a flower farm and he paid them the minimum of a salary, but he told them, if you would work double, I would pay you the double salary, but they refused. They don't want to be stressed. They don't want to be stressed.
Mm.
Italians, you can stress less than Germans or Japanese. So this is very interesting fact. They don't die of heart attacks. Perhaps they die of Western fast food and cholesterol or diabetes, but they don't die of stress. For example, they are stress resistant. They don't want stress. So interesting fact.
Yeah, it's fascinating indeed. And thank you for sharing so openly and honestly. I have enjoyed this conversation so much, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same. Thank you for listening to Buddhism Podcast. Wherever you are, we're grateful that you showed up. Until next time.
Thank you.